now to Harry Broadman, who's a former US Assistant Trade Representative and Chief of Staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. Harry, thanks very much for making the time to speak to us today. I mean, what do you make and where are we currently with Donald Trump's trade wars and these tariffs? It seems sort of rhetorically, at least, like he might be stepping back.
Well, I would be very cautious about trying to interpret what he is doing, frankly. He has engendered so much uncertainty by dint of his behavior on and off, that I think, businesses and investors have to be quite cautious as to what his next proposal is. And to be honest, from a U.S. perspective, I'm not sure that he is negotiating in the U.S. Best interest or the global economy's best interest. He's, this reciprocal tariff, in his view is a logical one, but it's not necessarily a growth-oriented strategy, whether for the U.S. or our trading partners. And I think the question is, let's not lose sight of the uncertainty that he's injecting. And more importantly, we should be looking for a way of engendering greater cooperation among U.S. trade allies, particularly in the G7. So that the U.S.-UK deal that was signed, a couple of weeks ago is great for our two economies, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done generally for the global economy to reduce this level of uncertainty that he's injecting.
And Harry, I guess, look, the overriding philosophy of these tariffs from Trump was this idea that you make it in America, you don't pay a tariff, and that's an idea brings businesses back, it creates jobs and tax revenue, and that was going to be a great thing for the American economy. I wonder, a few months into this backwards and forwards by Trump with his tariffs, how much that's being felt by US companies?
Well, as I said, not much has been implemented under his regime, so it's very difficult to gauge the benefits and the cost of his policy. And also, let's not forget who pays tariffs. Mr. Trump believes that it's the exporting country from which we import goods that pays the tariffs. It's actually the American consumer who has to file with our officials here to pay those tariffs. So it's not the countries who pay them. Where the countries pay, in quotes, is their blocked access from further penetrating U.S. markets because their goods, all other things equal, have become more expensive to U.S. consumers. But it's the U.S. side who's paying these tariffs, not the foreign countries. And Mr. Trump still does not get that point, and most of us have been pressing him to understand that, but I'm not sure he really does understand that.
Well, let's just stay with that then, Harry, if you can. When you do offer that advice, I wonder how it is received and whether or not you guys get a sense, you guys who've been doing this for a long time. Donald Trump thinks of himself as a great deal maker, but you guys are obviously in the room as well and trying to help with those decisions. How is it received? And more broadly, to business and sort of the economy of the United States, this backwards and forwards, it can't be helping with anyone's confidence as to what might well come in the next weeks, let alone months.
If not the next hour. No, you put your finger on the problem. From a trade negotiating perspective, usually you want to give and take with the various countries by issuing these letters, which are veiled or somewhat unveiled threats about what's down the road, possibly. One notion that I believe is that by actually not engaging in negotiations, but simply tabling, here's what's going to happen, he may well be undercutting himself by getting a better negotiation, by having face-to-face talks and understanding what the other side wants from the U.S. and what the U.S. wants from the other side. That's the meat and potatoes of trade negotiations. And you never know, frankly, what's going to happen around the table. Yes, we know the broad architecture, but for a guy who prides himself on a deal maker, sending letters out, I know there's a lot of bluster. I'm from New York. I watched him as I grew up, but I'm not sure that from the U.S. economic growth and the world economic growth perspective, he's doing much to advance that. And in fact, as I said, I think he's injecting greater uncertainty into the global economy than sort of calming things down. So here's where we are, folks. We're moving from A to B, and here's what I expect to happen, other than simply what's going to happen in the U.S. alone, perhaps.
Yeah, and we'll see what the next hour brings, Harry, as you rightly point out. Look, really good to speak with you, Harry. We've run out of time, but good talk. Thanks very much for being with us. Harry Broadman, former US Assistant